Welcome to the Stoic Tide. Someone just said something that makes your blood boil. All eyes are on you, waiting for your reaction. Sharp words are ready to spill from your mouth. But this is the moment to remember a timeless lesson from the ancient masters. The wise don't win by shouting. They win with composure, with the weapon of reason, and with responses that silence an opponent without ever raising their voice. This isn't about backing down or being weak. It's about holding the truest form of strength, the power to control your own reaction. I'm not here to teach you how to argue or cut someone down. I'll show you how to end conflict with elegance, protect your dignity, and sometimes even turn an enemy into an ally. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best answer to anger is intentional silence." Today, I'll share 5 clever responses the Stoics have used for over 2,000 years. The third one is especially powerful because it transforms an attack into a self-exposure, making the aggressor realize they've revealed more about themselves than about you. Stick around, hit that subscribe button, and let's get wiser together. Response number 1, I see your point. Help me understand your reasoning. The most powerful weapon against aggression isn't a sharp sword or cutting words. It's genuine curiosity. When someone attacks your ideas or character, instead of rushing into defense or counterattack, you respond with sincere interest in their perspective. This completely disarms them because they've prepared mentally for a battle, not a conversation. I remember a tense team meeting from a few years ago. We were discussing a project proposal that I had spent weeks researching and developing. In the middle of my presentation, a colleague suddenly interrupted and declared, "You're completely out of touch with reality on this proposal. It's clear you don't understand anything about the current market." My blood immediately boiled. I could feel my face heating up, and my first natural reaction was to defend my work, to list all the research I'd done, all the experts I'd consulted. But instead, I took a deep breath and said, "I see your point, David. Can you help me understand your reasoning? Which specific aspects seem unrealistic to you?" The room suddenly went quiet. All eyes turned to David, waiting for his answer. And then something interesting happened. He started stumbling. Generally speaking, he fumbled around looking for specific reasons and couldn't find any. Eventually, he admitted that he hadn't read through the entire proposal carefully and was just reacting based on gut feeling. This response has power because it forces them to shift from emotional reaction to logical explanation. Most people who attack with words can't actually defend their position when pressed for specific details. They can throw around vague accusations like unrealistic, naive, or uninformed. But when you ask them to explain specifically, they often discover they don't have anything substantial to say. This is exactly what Socrates, whom the Stoic philosophers deeply admired, had mastered. He said, "The only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing." This response embodies that humility. You acknowledge that perhaps you've missed something and genuinely want to learn, but at the same time, it also gently exposes the lack of knowledge in others without being aggressive. What's brilliant about this method is that it transforms you from a target into the person leading the conversation. Instead of being pushed into a defensive position, you've taken control by asking questions. Now they have to prove their point instead of you having to defend yours. The psychology behind this is fascinating. When people make attacking statements, they're often operating from emotion rather than logic. They haven't thought through their criticism carefully. They're just reacting. By asking for their reasoning, you're forcing them to engage their rational mind, and often they realize their attack was unfounded. Use this response when someone makes vague accusations or criticism. It's extremely important that your tone be genuine. You're not being sarcastic at all. You truly want to understand. If your tone sounds challenging or condescending, this method will backfire. Instead, speak with the genuine curiosity of someone who wants to learn. This method is particularly effective with people who love to criticize but hate having to explain themselves. Those who throw out quick judgments without solid foundation. It's also powerful in group settings because everyone witnesses the person either provide substantive reasoning or reveal that they were just being difficult. The beauty is that you maintain your dignity while giving them an opportunity to either contribute meaningfully or expose their own lack of substance. You're not attacking them back. You're simply asking them to support their attack with facts. But sometimes after you ask them to explain, you discover that they actually do have a valid point. They might present compelling reasons and legitimate concerns. That's exactly when our second response becomes essential. Response number 2, "You're absolutely right, and here's what I'm going to do about it." Sometimes the fastest way to win is to surrender strategically. When someone points out a legitimate flaw or mistake, instead of making excuses or getting defensive, you immediately acknowledge it and announce your plan to fix it. This removes all their ammunition and transforms the entire dynamic of the conversation. This happened to me during a client meeting that I'll never forget. We had been working with this particular client for about 6 months, and they had noticed a pattern they weren't happy with. Right in front of the entire team, the client said, "Your team has missed the deadline again. This is becoming a serious pattern, and frankly, it's affecting our confidence in your ability to deliver." I could feel the tension in the room. My team was looking at me, probably expecting me to explain all the valid reasons why we'd been delayed. The scope changes, the technical challenges, the resource constraints, and honestly, we did have legitimate reasons. But instead of going down that path, I looked directly at the client and said, "You're absolutely right, and here's what I'm going to do about it. I'm implementing a new project tracking system this week that will give us better visibility into potential delays. I'll also be sending you weekly progress updates every Friday, so you'll never be surprised again. And for this current project, I'm personally taking ownership to ensure we deliver by the revised deadline we'll set today." The change in the room was immediate. The client's defensive posture relaxed. Instead of continuing to attack our reliability, they started asking constructive questions about the new system. We spent the rest of the meeting collaborating on solutions rather than defending past mistakes. This response works because people who criticize want to see one of two things. Either they want you to squirm and make excuses, which proves they were right to doubt you, or they want to see you take the problem seriously and fix it. When you choose the second option immediately, you turn criticism into cooperation. The psychological power here is profound. Most people expect defensiveness when they point out problems. They're prepared for a fight, for explanations, for blame shifting, when instead you own the issue completely and present immediate action steps. You demonstrate the kind of leadership and maturity that actually builds respect, rather than destroys it. Epictetus taught us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Taking immediate responsibility embodies wisdom and strength, better than any defense ever could. It shows that you're more interested in solving problems than in protecting your ego. But here's the crucial caveat. Only use this response when the criticism is actually valid. If someone is making unfair accusations or attacking you for things beyond your control, this response would be inappropriate. The power comes specifically from your willingness to accept reality and act on it immediately when you genuinely are at fault. What makes this so disarming is that it removes the critic's entire reason for being upset. They brought up the problem because they wanted it fixed. When you immediately commit to fixing it, they get exactly what they wanted. There's nothing left to fight about. This response turns critics into collaborators almost instantly. Instead of being adversaries arguing about whether a problem exists, you become partners working together to solve it. The person who is criticizing you often becomes your biggest supporter because you've shown that you listen and take action. But not all attacks are based on legitimate concerns. Some people just want to provoke you for the sake of provocation, and that requires a completely different approach. Which brings us to our third response. Response number 3. That's an interesting perspective. What made you think of it? The most elegant way to silence someone is to let them reveal themselves. When someone makes a provocative or insulting comment, you respond with calm curiosity about their motivation. This forces them to either admit they're being unreasonable or dig themselves deeper into an indefensible position. I witnessed this masterfully executed at a dinner party last year. A friend of mine, let's call her Rachel, is a freelance graphic designer who's built a successful business over the past decade. During the evening, someone she'd just met made a snide comment. "Freelancing must be nice, basically getting paid to play around on a computer all day without any real responsibility." The comment was clearly meant to provoke. Everyone at the table felt the sting of it. Rachel could have gotten defensive, could have listed her credentials, her client list, the long hours she works. Instead, she smiled genuinely and said, "That's an interesting perspective. What made you think of that?" The man stammered for a moment, clearly not expecting that response. "Well, it seems like he struggled to find words that didn't make him sound petty or ignorant." Finally, he admitted, "I guess I don't really know what freelance design work involves." The entire table witnessed him reveal his own ignorance and prejudice. This response is brilliant because it appears genuinely interested, while actually exposing the speaker's lack of substance or hidden motivations. They thought they were attacking you, but they end up attacking themselves. You've given them enough rope and they've used it exactly as you knew they would. The beauty lies in its apparent innocence. You're not being sarcastic or confrontational. You sound like someone who's genuinely curious about how they formed their opinion. But psychologically, you're forcing them to examine and explain their thought process, and most provocative comments can't survive that kind of scrutiny. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This response embodies that perfectly. While they're trying to bring you down to their level of pettiness, you remain composed, curious, and dignified. The contrast becomes obvious to everyone watching. The key to this response is your tone. You must sound genuinely curious, not sarcastic. Let their words, not your attitude, do the work of exposing them. If you deliver this with even a hint of mockery, it becomes an attack rather than an invitation for them to reflect. This is particularly effective with people who make assumptions or judgments without facts, who speak from prejudice rather than knowledge. It's also powerful because it works in any setting: professional environments, social gatherings, even family dinners where someone makes an inappropriate comment. What happens next is usually one of two things. Either they realize they've been unfair and apologize, or they double down and make themselves look even worse. Either way, you win without fighting. The person making the provocative comment usually hasn't thought through why they said what they said. They're operating from emotion, assumption, or some unexamined bias. When you ask them to trace their reasoning, they often discover they don't have any real basis for their attack. Sometimes, though, you'll encounter someone who won't be deterred by logic, curiosity, or even their own obvious lack of reasoning. They're determined to be difficult regardless of how gracefully you respond. That's when you need our fourth response. Response number 4. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Nothing disarms hostility quite like unexpected gratitude. When faced with insults, complaints, or harsh criticism, you respond with sincere appreciation for their honesty. This completely changes the dynamic from confrontation to conversation, often leaving the other person confused about whether they should continue being aggressive. This approach saved what could have been a nightmare situation with my neighbor about 2 years ago. I had recently adopted a rescue dog, and apparently he was barking during the early morning hours while I was at work. I had no idea this was happening until my neighbor confronted me one evening. He stormed over to my front yard while I was getting my mail and shouted, "Your dog is driving the whole neighborhood crazy. He barks nonstop from 6 in the morning until you get home." It's completely inconsiderate, and frankly, some of us are thinking about calling animal control. My first instinct was to get defensive. I wanted to explain that I'd just adopted the dog, that I was working on the problem, that he could have approached me more civilly. But instead I took a breath and said, "I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I had no idea this was happening, and I'm genuinely glad you felt comfortable enough to tell me directly rather than just letting the frustration build up." The change in his demeanor was immediate and dramatic. His shoulders relaxed, his voice softened, and suddenly we weren't adversaries anymore. We were two neighbors trying to solve a problem together. He started offering suggestions about dog training, told me about his own experiences with pets, and even recommended a local trainer who had helped his sister. What started as an angry confrontation ended with us exchanging phone numbers so he could text me if the barking happened again. This response works because people expect defensiveness or counterattack when they approach you with complaints. They've often rehearsed the conversation in their head, preparing for you to make excuses or attack them back. When you respond with gratitude instead, you completely derail their prepared script and force them to shift into a more collaborative mindset. The psychological principle here is profound. When someone criticizes you aggressively, they're usually feeling frustrated or powerless about something. By thanking them for their honesty, you're acknowledging their feelings and treating them as someone whose opinion matters. This transforms them from an adversary into someone who's helping you improve. Seneca taught us every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. This response ends the conflict and begins cooperation. It demonstrates that you're secure enough in yourself to receive feedback without becoming defensive, even when it's delivered poorly. The key is recognizing the difference between someone who's genuinely trying to help, even if they're doing it rudely, and someone who's just trying to hurt you. This response works best when the person actually has a legitimate concern, but is expressing it in an aggressive or inconsiderate way. Your gratitude acknowledges their good intention while completely ignoring their poor delivery. What's remarkable is how this response often brings out the best in people. When you treat someone as reasonable and well-intentioned, they often rise to meet that expectation. The neighbor who was shouting at me about my dog became one of my most helpful allies in solving the problem. You'll be amazed how quickly people's tone changes when they feel heard and appreciated, rather than attacked or dismissed. It's the difference between making an enemy and making an ally over the exact same issue. But what about those situations where nothing you say seems to matter? Where someone is determined to be difficult regardless of how gracefully you respond? That's where our final response proves most powerful of all. Response number 5. Silent pause and thank you for that insight. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one that follows silence. When someone says something particularly outrageous or hurtful, you pause for a few seconds, make eye contact, and then calmly say, "Thank you for that insight." The pause does most of the work. It forces everyone to really hear what was just said, while your gracious response highlights the stark contrast between their behavior and yours. I'll never forget when this response saved my reputation during a business presentation about 3 years ago. I was pitching a new marketing strategy to a room full of potential partners, including several competitors. The presentation was going well until one of my competitors, clearly feeling threatened, decided to try to undermine me publicly. Right in the middle of my explanation about market research, he interrupted and said, "I'm not sure we can trust marketing advice from someone with such obviously limited experience in this field. Maybe we should hear from someone who actually knows what they're talking about." The room went dead silent. Everyone could feel the inappropriate aggression of his comment. I felt the familiar surge of anger and the urge to defend my credentials, to list my achievements, to point out his own failures. Instead, I stopped talking, looked directly at him for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 seconds, and then said calmly, "Thank you for that insight." The silence that followed was deafening. His attack hung in the air like a bad smell that everyone could suddenly detect. People started shifting uncomfortably in their seats. A few actually looked embarrassed for him. I didn't need to defend myself. His own words, highlighted by my response and that strategic pause, showed everyone exactly what kind of person he was. The rest of the presentation went smoothly, and afterward several people approached me privately to apologize for his behavior and to express how impressed they were with how I handled it. The contract we were competing for, we got it partly because the committee felt he had shown poor judgment and unprofessional behavior. The pause is absolutely crucial to this technique. It creates space for their words to hang in the air where everyone can examine them. During those few seconds of silence, people have time to process what was actually said and recognize how inappropriate it was. Without the pause, your response might seem automatic or sarcastic. With it, you demonstrate complete emotional control. Your calm response should sound genuinely appreciative, not sarcastic. The goal isn't to mock them, but to show such grace under pressure that their attack becomes obviously petty by comparison. You're taking the high road so visibly that everyone can see the difference between your character and theirs. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This response demonstrates complete mastery over your emotional reactions. While they're letting their worst impulses control them, you're showing the kind of self-discipline that true strength requires. This response is particularly powerful in group settings, where others can witness the contrast between your composure and their aggression. It works because it makes their behavior the focus rather than the content of their attack. People stop thinking about whether their criticism was valid and start thinking about why they chose to express it so inappropriately. The person who attacked you is often left feeling foolish because they realize everyone saw their true character. They prepared for you to get angry, to fight back, to justify their aggression. Instead, you responded with such dignity that you made them look small without saying a single negative word about them. What makes this response so effective is that it embodies the core Stoic principle. You cannot control others' behavior, but you can control your response to it. By choosing grace over retaliation, patience over reactivity, you demonstrate the kind of strength that actually commands respect. These 5 responses work because they all share a common thread. They keep you in control of yourself while letting others reveal who they truly are. That's the real power of Stoic wisdom. Not in winning arguments, but in maintaining your dignity regardless of how others choose to behave. These 5 responses share a common thread. They keep you in control of yourself while allowing others to reveal their true character. That's the real power of Stoic wisdom. Not in winning arguments, but in maintaining your dignity regardless of how others choose to behave. Remember, the goal isn't to defeat people in conversation. It's to preserve your peace of mind and create meaningful dialogue whenever possible. When you respond with wisdom instead of emotion, you don't just win the argument, you earn respect and often transform conflict into cooperation. The ancient Stoics understood that our reactions define us more than what happens to us. These responses prove that strength isn't about having the loudest voice or the sharpest comeback. True strength lies in choosing grace under pressure. If this video helped you feel more confident in challenging conversations, please like it to share this wisdom with others who need it. Subscribe to the Stoic Tide to continue building the mental discipline that leads to genuine respect and inner peace. Your responses reveal your character,